Picture this. A young man walks into a crumbling bank that everyone said was finished. The bank had lost so much money, people joked it was cheaper to use the building as firewood. But this man saw something nobody else did. He bought that dying bank for almost nothing and turns it into a financial empire worth billions. That man was Tony Elumelu, and what he did next completely changed how Africa thinks about money, business, and its own potential. The real secret wasn't just about building banks. It was about building something far more powerful. Something that would create over 400,000 jobs, transform entire communities, and prove to the world that Africa doesn't need savings. It needs investing. By the end of this story, goal-getters, you would understand why Tony Elumelu's approach to wealth creation is the blueprint every African entrepreneur should study. Because what he discovered about turning failure into fortune will change everything you think you know about African business. I can guarantee you that, for I've learned a lot from him. But first, let me tell you about a conversation that changed everything. March 22nd, 1963, in Jos, Nigeria, a baby boy was born to Susan and Dominique Elumelu in a middle-class family. Nothing about this birth suggested that this child would one day be named among Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. But here's the thing about destiny. It often whispers before it roars. Tony's mother owned restaurants and was a major distributor in the consumer value chain. So every day, young Tony watched her negotiate with suppliers, manage staff, count money, and most importantly, he watched her create value from nothing. His mother wasn't just running business. She was demonstrating something profound, that with vision and hard work, you could feed families, employ people, and build wealth simultaneously. Think about it. How many entrepreneurs can trace their first business lessons back to watching their parents? Tony would later say, entrepreneurship is both an innate talent and a learned one. My mother showed me the far-reaching value that entrepreneurship creates. Now fast forward to university. Tony studied economics at Ambrose Ali University, earning his bachelor's degree, then pursued a master's in economics from the University of Lagos. But here's where the story really begins. While his classmates were dreaming of government jobs, the typical path for young, ambitious Nigerians in the 1980s, Tony was studying something different. He was studying patterns, economic patterns, business patterns. And most importantly, he was identifying gaps no one seemed to notice. So what pattern was he seeing? Well, Nigeria had just become a leading oil producer. Money was flowing. But there was one crucial element missing: a banking system that could truly serve African businesses and African dreams. In a minute, I'll show you how a chance encounter with a dying bank would prove this theory right and launch a revolution. In 1985, Tony Elumelu starts his career at Union Bank during his National Youth Service Corps, then moves to All States Trust Bank. He's doing well, climbing the corporate ladder, earning respect. By all accounts, he's on track for a comfortable banking career. But here's what changed everything. We commonly say in Africa that a person who plants a tree knowing fully well that they will never sit in its shade understands the meaning of life. Now bear in mind that the 1990s brought chaos to Nigerian banking. Many banks were failing and the smart money was staying away from risky ventures. But Tony saw something everyone else missed. He saw opportunity hiding in plain sight. Now, 1997, Crystal Bank Limited is dying. This bank is deep in debt, so mismanaged that financial experts are calling it financial suicide to get involved. The bank's reputation is in tatters. Customers are fleeing. Employees are updating their CVs. Now, here's a question that separates visionaries from everybody else. When you see a burning building, do you run away or do you ask yourself if there's something valuable in the ashes that everyone else is too scared to try and collect? Tony chose the ashes. At 34 years old, he led a small group of investors to acquire the struggling Crystal Bank. People thought he had lost his mind. His friends questioned his judgment. Even some family members worried he was throwing his career away. But Tony had a plan so audacious, so counterintuitive that when it worked, it would completely redefine what was possible in African banking. And mark you go-getters, the real reason behind this bold move is something nobody's talking about. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Here's what nobody tells you about Tony's Crystal Bank acquisition. He didn't just buy a dying bank. He bought a laboratory for testing revolutionary ideas about African finance. Now, his first move was obviously to rebrand. So Crystal Bank became Trust Bank. This was a psychological revolution. Why does this matter? Because in a continent where most businesses were still operating with colonial-era mentalities, Tony was creating something authentically African that could compete globally. So the name Standard Trust sent a message. We meet international standards, but we understand African trust. Do you get it? What happened next was extraordinary. Within just a few years, Tony transformed Standard Trust Bank from a failing institution into Nigeria's fifth largest bank. But here's the part that's truly revolutionary. He didn't do it by cutting costs or firing people. He did it by investing in people, technology, and most importantly, by creating financial products that actually served African businesses and African families. For the first time, you had a bank that understood the Nigerian trader who needed quick loans for inventory. A bank that understood the small manufacturer that had great ideas but needed patient capital. We are talking here of a bank that understood that the African customer wasn't just a number. They were the heartbeat of economic growth. By 2005, Standard Trust Bank was successful, so profitable, so well positioned that something unprecedented happened. Something that will make Tony Elumelu a household name across Africa. But before I tell you about the merger that shook the continent, let me share a contrarian viewpoint that some of Tony Elumelu's still hold today. Now, let's be honest, not everyone believed in Tony's vision. Critics called his approach too aggressive, too risky. Some questioned whether rapid expansion could be sustained. Others pointed to ongoing challenges in Nigeria's power sector despite his investments. And they had reasons to worry. The 1990s were littered with ambitious banks that collapsed overnight. But here's the thing about critics. They often underestimate what's possible when vision meets execution. Because what happens next would silence even the biggest skeptics. In 2005, Tony orchestrates the largest merger in sub-Saharan African banking history. Standard Trust Bank merges with United Bank for Africa, a 70-year-old institution set in its way. Now, Tony doesn't just manage this merger, he revolutionizes it. Within years, UBA expands from one country to 20 African nations, plus operations in France, USA, and UK. Think about what this means. An African bank proving it can compete globally while serving African needs profitably. Honestly, this man is a model to me. That's why I am affiliated to UBA Bank, obviously, alright? I do all of my transactions through the UBA Bank. For those of you go-getters who've been transacting with me, you can confirm that, right? Now, it is crystal clear that this man has done a lot. But 2010 brings Tony's biggest revelation yet. At 47, already incredibly wealthy, Tony steps down as UBA's group managing director. He could retire in luxury. Instead, he does something that shocks the business world. He introduces Africapitalism, the philosophy that Africa's private sector can transform the continent through investments that create both economic prosperity and social work. Here's a breakthrough. For decades, Africa was seen as a continent needing aid. Tony's philosophy flips this completely. Africapitalism says Africa doesn't need saving. Africa needs investing. As Tony often puts it, we cannot wait for the government to solve all our problems. The private sector must step up. And through S Holdings, he puts this into practice. Energy through Transcorp, healthcare, financial services, every investment profitable and transformative at the same time. But how do you scale this from thousands to millions? In 2010, Tony and his wife, Dr. Awele, democratized luck across Africa. What does this mean? Tony explains. I've been lucky. I had mentors, opportunities, capital, but millions of brilliant young Africans don't. How do we change that? In 2015, Tony commits $100 million over 10 years to create 10,000 entrepreneurs across Africa. Each receives $5,000 seed capital plus comprehensive training and mentoring. I have an acquaintance who actually benefited from this $5,000 to enhance her restaurant business right here in Yaoundé, and she is doing perfectly well. Now, this project has got over 21,000 entrepreneurs funded already, 1.5 million trained online, $4.2 billion in revenue generated, and 400,000 jobs plus created, all in the 54 African countries. From Lagos to Nairobi, from Yaoundé to Cape Town, TAF entrepreneurs are building tech companies, agricultural businesses, manufacturing operations. They are not waiting for opportunities. They are creating them. Do you realize what this means? One foundation has generated more economic activities than entire government programs. TAF entrepreneurs are proving African solutions can compete globally. Now here's the stunning truth. Foreign aid to Africa over 60 years totals $1 trillion. Yet, dependency persists. Now look at Tony's model. Instead of creating dependency, it creates capacity. Instead of temporary relief, permanent wealth creation systems. TAF entrepreneurs are now mentoring other entrepreneurs. They are raising capital. They are creating second-generation businesses. The multiplier effect is exponential. Some have actually grown from $5,000 to companies worth millions, proving African entrepreneurship can actually compete with Silicon Valley in London. So what happens when this scales? When every other African country has Tony Elumelu inspired entrepreneurs? Africa transforms from aid recipients to wealth creators, from depending on others to creating global innovation. Now, go-getters, the reason I decided to come up with success stories of African entrepreneurs is actually to inspire you, right? So, or inspire us, yeah, because I constantly get inspired by them, all right? So, what are the lessons we could learn from them? Let's see what we could learn from Tony Elumelu. So I am going to be pointing out his principles that we could actually apply, all right? Now, the first thing is to see opportunity in crisis. When others saw Crystal Bank's failure, Tony saw possibility. Your breakthrough is hiding in your industry's biggest complaint. Number 2 is to think continental from day one, right? That is, think big, think far. Tony's vision was always Pan-African. Your local success should just be like your testing ground, okay? Your main aim should actually be to expand across the continent, and why not across the globe. Lesson 3 is to build ecosystems, not just businesses. Don't just create a company. Create systems that enable others' successes. And the 4th thing to do is to measure impact and not just income. Tony is worth $700+ million, but his legacy is 400,000+ jobs created. Sustainable wealth comes from transformative impact. So this is what I always tell people to do, alright? Try and identify that one thing that everyone in your field complains about. Try to design a solution that doesn't just fix it, but creates a platform for other solutions. Just apply this thinking to your next venture and you will thank me later. So here's the truth about Tony Elumelu's wealth creation that nobody talks about. It was never about money. From buying a dying bank to funding 21,000 entrepreneurs, every move was driven by one belief. Africa's prosperity depends on Africans taking control of Africa's future. And that takes us back to a proverb that I told you that we often say in Africa, that a person that plants a tree knowing fully well that they will never sit in its shade understands life. So Tony Elumelu is one of those people who actually understand life. He is planting a forest. Every entrepreneur funds it. Every job his company creates, every young African who now sees possibility instead of limitation. These are trees providing shade for generations to come. Right now, as you watch this, there's a TEF entrepreneur in Lagos building the next unicorn, a farmer in Kenya revolutionizing agriculture, and a manufacturer in Ghana creating globally competitive products. Now, the question isn't whether Tony's approach works. The results prove it does. The question is, what role will you play in Africa's economic renaissance? 150,000 entrepreneurs apply to TEF annually. Only 1,000 selected, but those 149,000 rejected. They are still part of a movement, still connected to a network, still inspired by possibility. Because wealth creation isn't about how much you accumulate. It's about how much you activate. Tony didn't just create wealth. He created a blueprint every African entrepreneur can follow. The trees are planted, the shade is growing. Africa's economic future has never looked brighter, and your breakthrough might be just one bold decision away. Luck and hard work are inextricable in success, but we must democratize luck so that hard work has a fair chance to succeed. That's Tony Elumelu's quote that I leave you with, as I hope to see you on the next one.